we're both your country, my country, your ministers and myself, trying to get our arms around exactly what's going on, because it's a different phenomenon. I've only been in this job now 7 weeks. It's a very different phenomenon than anyone has seen in the past.
Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly on the surge in illegal border crossings in parts of this country. Kelly was the first emissary Donald Trump dispatched to Ottawa. He met with a number of ministers on Friday, chief among them his counterpart, Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale, who said that gathering data on asylum seekers is the priority right now. Who's organizing these drop-offs? This week, another 19 asylum seekers from the U.S. braved a blizzard to get into this country. Kelly also weighed in on the matter of U.S. border officials turning back several Canadian citizens at the border. So, did Ralph Goodale get the answers he was looking for from John Kelly? The asylum seekers coming across our border remain a bit of a mystery, even to the most powerful security officials, some of them legally in the U.S. only for a few days. Well, we're going to ask the questions right here on the Sunday Scrum. Joining me today, freelance columnist Susan Riley. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning.
John Ibbotson of the Globe and Mail. Good morning, John.
Hi, Carol.
And we welcome to the Sunday Scrum for the first time this week, Denise Ciele. Good morning, Denise.
Good morning.
Denise is with SEM Group. It's a strategic events, public affairs company actively involved with the group Equal Voice Canada. That group, by the way, organized this week's Daughters of the Vote event in the House of Commons. She's also a broadcaster. Everyone joins me from Ottawa today. All right, on the asylum seekers, John Kelly says he is perplexed because most of the people who are crossing the border into Canada were in the U.S. legally. John, let me begin with you. What do you make of this meeting between the two gurus of national security?
Well, first of all, it's encouraging that they're talking. The Trump administration and the Trudeau government need to cooperate, notwithstanding any differences of opinion between the Prime Minister and the President himself on immigration issues. And it's a bit like the Tamil boat people who came here a few years ago. The part of the problem is, refugee claimants arriving on our shores seeking asylum when they don't really qualify for that asylum. The other problem, though, is that these people are in many ways the victims of organized criminal activity very often. And the reason we haven't had any boatloads of Tamil refugee claimants in the recent years, partly is we toughen up the laws, but partly is because Canada worked with officials overseas to find out where these networks were, who they were, and to get them shut down. And the same thing is probably true here. We need to find out who is telling Somali refugee claimants that they can get into the United States and then head straight up to Canada, where they will have a better chance of being accepted as refugees than in the United States. These people are being used and exploited, and it's in Canada's and the United States' interest to identify them and to shut them down.
Susan, what do you think? And what do you make of the whole idea that this may be part of a criminal organization, and the weirdness of people who have just arrived in the U.S. legally making this journey into Canada?
Well, I think maybe is the crucial word here. I mean, John's conjectures may be true, but the truth is nobody really is telling us. Nobody's telling us the truth. Do they know? Perhaps they don't know, they being the authorities. Perhaps they don't know the story behind these different people who are coming across. Probably the stories are not all identical either. I've been struck, first of all, John Flynn's arrival here, it's part of this good cop, bad cop thing that the Trump administration seems to be specializing in. So we have this sort of scary president issuing denunciations of various groups, and then he has his emissaries who are sent around the world to sort of smooth the waters. So Mr. Kelly expressed no nervousness at all about the Canadian border. It clearly isn't a concern for him. What I find frustrating is our immigration minister, Ahmed Hussein, who himself is a Somali refugee, and whose answers to various questions have been really evasive. You feel that he knows more than he's letting on, and perhaps he doesn't, but that's the impression he gives. He probably knows more than he's saying, and I wish he would just say it and let us know what really is happening.
Denise, what do you make of all this mystery?
Well, the thing is, it really is quite troubling because the answers aren't forthcoming. There's this rise now in the number of asylum seekers. From what we have heard, a large percentage of them are legal in the United States. So what's really behind this push? So I think those are questions that need to be answered both on the Canadian side, and I suspect that following this meeting with the Secretary of Homeland Security, that the Canadian officials are really drilling down on that. But I think the larger question here as well is, as Canada has expressed really an openness, is this an opportunity now for those who are in some ways looking to go around the safe third country safe provision? So really a lot more questions that we have than answers at this point.
Okay, so you think there might be, just to clarify, Denise, you think there might be there are people who you feel are trying to take advantage of the system, go around the safe third party to get into Canada? Can you expand on that a bit?
Well, look, that's certainly a possibility. But, you know, when you see the images of individuals who are really risking their lives to come to Canada, and you cannot question those motives. But what is, in my sense, really more important is to understand why this increase, this spike. And, you know, folks would look to the Trump administration and maybe what some might view as an unwelcoming climate to individuals from very specific countries, and in fact, I'd say Muslims. And so there's, again, I will say that it is incumbent upon the Canadian officials to really give us a sense of who are these individuals that are really risking their lives to come, but also why are they doing it? Why is it that they feel compelled, given legal status in the U.S., to move to Canada?
And Ralph Goodale says, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, it's more than incumbent, it's urgent, because I'm afraid that in the absence of information, you know, all sorts of negative and hostile feelings are going to start to arise. There's going to be a backlash, and that will be ugly. And if we can head it off, first of all, the numbers are not overwhelming, but if we can head off that backlash with some facts, that would be helpful.
Yes, and I'm also worried about a backlash, because at all costs we have to retain the confidence of Canadians in the integrity of the immigration and refugee system. But look, one of the reasons we may not be getting information is that there may be criminal investigations underway. And when criminal investigations are underway, politicians and police tend to remain silent. What we know, and again, it is speculation, I grant you, but what we know is that people are making their way from Somalia through a very circuitous route involving Latin America into the United States. They're coming up to Wisconsin, where there's a large Somali American community, and to other places as well. And then they are taking taxis, being dropped off short of the border, and then struggling across the snow to get into Canada. That really does suggest to me some kind of organized activity by probably a criminal organization to exploit these refugee claimants who have gone through tremendous hardship and personal risk to get where they've gotten, but who are themselves perhaps the pawns of of a criminal gang. And if that is the case, then I'd understand why the Americans and the Canadians are keeping silent, because they're trying to find out who's doing it so they can arrest them.
Yeah, this is what Ralph Goodale had to say. Let's roll that clip about the genesis of this.
There is no evidence of this that we know of yet, but we want to watch very carefully to see if there's any element of profiteering here. Is there any element of exploitation, of human trafficking?
These traffickers are not particularly nice people. In fact, they're pretty despicable people. They'll take your money and take you into very, very serious, similar on the Mexican border, only in much larger numbers. People have to be careful.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like, if there's not a full investigation, as you say, John, and Denise, I'll put this to you, then they're on the verge of one. They're looking for evidence.
And that's it precisely. We really are operating in a vacuum here in terms of understanding, what's clear is the numbers are increasing and what's motivating that. But certainly, in terms of thinking about the Canadian context, that the fact that we have this increasing number of folks who in many ways are we would see them as being desperate to move to Canada, but let's really have that conversation about who's behind it. And I believe that that's the conversation that's happening right now with the Canadian officials.
Let's talk about people going the other way. One of the questions that Ralph Goodale would have had for John Kelly is, why are people with valid Canadian passports being turned away at the border? Here's what John Kelly had to say to Rosemary Barton of Power and Politics.
When there is a individual stopped at the border, it's for a reason. I respect the privacy rights of Canadians without question. And oftentimes we could defend ourselves by saying the reason was X. But we won't do that because, again, the privacy rights of the citizens of this great country are too important. When someone is stopped at the border and questioned or turned back, which is not very common, there's a reason why. What they say to the press is their business.
Okay, Susan, what do you make of his answer?
I think it's disgusting. I think it's pulling a veil of authority. I just think it's essentially blackening the name of the few individuals, all of whom are, well, many of whom are known to us, by suggesting that there's something fishy going on. Remember the young lad who was, I don't know if he was Moroccan-born or his parents were Moroccan-born, who was going down to play soccer. You know, the woman who was going down to Vermont with her two girlfriends, both of them white. They didn't get stopped and questioned. I think I thought it was sleazy and a cheap shot. If there's any problems, let's hear what those problems are. I didn't think it was I didn't think it was a good answer.
John, what did you think?
He has half a point, and I first of all want to, stress that I'm not in any way questioning the truth of what it is people have been telling the press, and I also know from personal experience that it's a mug's game crossing the border. When I lived in the United States, I got pulled into secondary twice. Once because the guy just didn't like the cut of my jib, and once because he had misread my visa and thought it was an improper visa. So there was both times, of course, I was cleared, missed my flights, but I was cleared. So you can find yourself just up against a not very nice border agent, someone who's had a bad morning, who got on the wrong side of bed, and capriciously subject to increased examination. It's also true, though, in journalism, these are difficult stories to do because you try to get the other side as well. And there may be a reason why the person was stopped. I don't, again, want to in any way question the sincerity and truthfulness of what others have been saying. But there can be reasons, and we just don't know what they are sometimes.
Yeah, that's tricky, isn't it, Denise?
Absolutely, and I tend to agree with John on that point. And really, to take it further, there's really nothing else that John Kelly could have said on that piece in terms of, because looking at very specific cases, he would not be in a position to, again, speak to one specific case. And he was very clear that out of, over 400,000 people that cross the border every day between Canada and the U.S., that there are instances of a few folks. But the key piece here is that there is a concern and a worry from the perspective of Canadians, from the perspective particularly of Muslim Canadians, who are questioning now whether, when they get to that border, what is that experience going to be like? Will I be detained? Will I be questioned? Will there be other pieces? And what John Kelly said, in fact, in terms of the one component around, check your pockets, Canadians. And, does that extend now to, what is on your phone? These questions around whether your social media accounts are going to be scrutinized. So, again, this is not a question that he could have answered any other way than to say people get stopped for specific reasons.